Okay, welcome to the next in our ongoing series of webinars around the 10 knowledge areas quality. Looking at the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, it's really divided kind of into two halves. The first half is really very much the technical side, scope, time, cost, and quality. And the reason I say this is because quality should be very much a quantified, kind of more of a hard start type item that will show us what we're doing quality-wise and how we're doing, and we want to try to make this as much as possible a objective measure. Now, just as we get started today, I need to admit that we ran the session already, and unfortunately we had some technical issues, and of course it happens during quality. We had some technical issues, so our recording didn't come out very well, so we're going to redo the recording. Now, the good news is the software that we're using does maintain all of the notes. So we'll be able to see people's answers to questions and poll items and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. As always, I'm David Donaldson, your host. I'll be leading us through the session today. Normally we have Jessica keeping an eye on the technology and supporting us, but since this is just a post-recording, it'll just be me. As always, we are recording this, so hence we're doing this recording. So anyone watching this will be watching on the recorded side. But if you do have any technical issues with it, if it's not quite working for you, just give us a call. For those who were participating, raise your hands, you have the chat window, and of course we always accept applause. So we're going to open with our opening thought, and this one comes from Aristotle. Quality is not an act, it is a habit. And I really like this quote because it really speaks to the ongoing nature of quality. It's ongoing and it's continuous, and as we're going to see in some of the elements of that, this isn't it's not a destination, really it's a journey. So we need to be continually thinking about it, and this isn't a I filled in the form, I'm done, I can check that box off and move on. This is it's an ongoing piece. So if we think about the importance of quality, if all things in our life were done right 99.9% of the time, then we would have 1 hour of unsafe drinking water. So you think about it, you walk to your tap anytime you turn it on, have a drink of water. 2 unsafe plane landings per day in Canada, 1,600 pieces of mail lost by Canada Post every hour. Now, these stats go back a little bit, so that might be slightly different nowadays, but I think we get the idea. 2,000 incorrect prescriptions a year, and 50 incorrect operations per week. And when we start to put it into those contexts and think about, the incorrect operations, and think about the impact that would have, and the potential consequences, it's pretty huge. So you can really see why some industries are hyper focused on this. Depending upon what industry you're in, this may be in running your projects. It can be in the form of things didn't quite go well, we lost a bit of money, we lost a bit of time, or, to take it to the extreme, someone could die. And, when we look at it in that context, quality can become very, very important. So the question is, describe a situation where you experienced some poor quality. So this was the first question posed to our group. Let's take a look at their answers. I love this first one from Don. No sugar in my double-double. From Kim, customer service, and I said to Kim, let's expand that a little bit. She replied again further down, just seeing if I can find it. It was a bad customer service experience. For me, it was my first SUV, so the first truck we bought. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Defective product. Order something online, the materials weren't good. I love this one here from Steven. Lawnmower did not work as promised. So you notice that a lot of the answers here, faulty shoes. And so, what happened there? And she said, well, 1 week after I got them, the heel fell off. Shoddy workmanship. And this is all speaking to the concept of, it needs to work, right? So we need to have a product, a service that is quality, but by saying that, what we're really saying is, it works. So whenever I talk about quality, I like to use the expression, does it friggin' work? And I want to use the example of my first SUV. We bought a Grand Wagoneer much like this one pictured here, with the real, sticker wood side, right? So love that truck. We actually really enjoyed it, but let me just walk you through some of the stuff. The back window that goes up and down, well, that stopped working. I had a wheel fall off. I'm turning right one day and the left wheel goes left. The engine, the starter motor went on it, and to start this thing, we used to call it the casino car because you turn the key. Is it going to start this time? And when it didn't, you'd open the hood and you'd have to give the starter motor a whack with a hammer. So standard procedures, we started carrying a hammer around underneath the driver's seat. Issues with the transmission, the four-wheel drive system, and so on. So, but we really liked the truck. It had the features that we wanted. It had the towing capacity. It worked. When it worked, it was a great truck. We enjoyed it. We loved it. But the reality is, the reliability was very, very low. So, I kind of put this as one of my classic scenarios, examples of, low quality. So how do we define quality? So I'm going to pop into the answers for that one. So I posed this question to the team, and the answers we got back was, it works as expected from Anne-Marie. And, couldn't have said it better myself, Anne-Marie. From Chloe, and I love this one, something being the best version of itself. So when we talk in terms of quality, is it being the best version of itself? Is it doing what it's advertised to do, doing what it's expected to do, right? And then we look down this list and we see from Sheila, met my expectations. From Steve, met my expectations. From Kelly, met my expectations. Scott, Catherine, and so on. So we see lots of people answering with, met my expectations. And, there is a lot to be said around quality meeting expectations. But at the end of the day, those expectations are, does it do the job that I need it to do, right? Does it friggin' work, right? So when we think about that and look at the PMI definition, the degree to which a set of inherent characteristics fulfill requirements. And I love this definition because it talks about requirements. And when we talk in terms of requirements, we're not talking features and functions. So when we think of requirements, what I want you to think of is a feature versus a requirement. So a feature fulfills a need. The requirement is the need. So I'm going to now take us back to this Grand Wagoneer. The requirement we had was transportation. The requirement we had was to tow a horse trailer with 2 horses on it. So it had the features that enabled us to do those things. So the 4-wheel drive was not a requirement. The 4-wheel drive was a feature. But the requirement was to be able to drive over a field with a horse trailer in tow, right? Because we would, go visit people in their farms and drive over to other people's farms. And, we needed to be able to go effectively off-road, right? So when we look at quality, it's about the characteristics that fulfill the requirements. So the features, it's what are the features that fulfill this requirement, right? And we can have different features fill those requirements, but the requirement is really the business need. So where do we implement quality in the world of PM? And we see the answers here: time, cost, scope, many things at once, all over the place, triple constraints. We're seeing the answers coming back as, we implement quality everywhere, right? And when we think about that from a project management perspective in the world of PM, it's really about, when I say where do we implement quality, we ask that question. It's within the management of the project, but also within the product of the project. So we're going to be doing this throughout and in both areas. There we go. That's right. Okay, there we go. Yep, that's in the right place. So now I'm reusing this old slide that I've used a few times now. And we're looking at the why, the what, and the how. The business need, what's the problem, need, or opportunity, the reason for the project. I'm looking at the scope, which is the deliverable, the thing, the product, right? And I'm looking at the project, which is the activity, which is the how, which is the work that goes into this. So we definitely want to have quality on the deliverable. And we're going to explore how that can have a very long-term effect and impact. But we also need quality on the activity. So when we're looking at evaluating the success, the relative success of our project, and we ask that question, did the product do what we needed to do? Did it do what we wanted it to do? Did we do what it asked it to do? Is it being the best self it can be? That's quality of the deliverable. Now we ask the question, did you deliver on time? Did you deliver on scope? Do you have stakeholders who want to work together again? Do you have a team that's usable again? We're now into quality of the project, or the project scope, or the how, right? And this is the quality of the activities that are going in to create those deliverables. So we want quality in all aspects, in all different areas. But yet when we put quality on the triangle, it shows up sitting there solidly beside scope. And when we talk about scope quality on the triangle, what we're talking about is product quality, right? We're saying that the quality of the product is very important. Totally agree, but we also want to consider the quality of the process. And this was a real epiphany for me when I first got into the formal side of project management. I mean, I was doing quality on the process side, but I wasn't thinking of it in those terms. Wasn't thinking of it in those terms. So while we want to create a quality product, we also want to do that in a quality way. Now, why do we want to do this? Well, and a lot of the quality discussion does come out of the world of manufacturing. So when we look at that, we want consistency. We want to know that the product that we get is going to be the same product as the next one, and especially when we look at manufacturing. So, and I'll use cars as my example. You can go to Canadian Tire, you can go buy a part for your 2010 Honda, and it doesn't matter which 2010 Honda you go to. So, specific model, right? Your Civic. So I buy that part for that 2010 Honda Civic. If I buy a second of the same part, it's going to be exactly the same. And I can go to any 2010 Honda Civic, of that make and model, and plug that part in and it works. And that's consistency. We need some completeness. There's that great example of the person who bought the lawnmower, said it didn't work. Maybe it wasn't complete. Maybe it was missing a part that didn't enable it to function. So when we're scoping our project, we want to make sure that all the parts are there so that it's enabled it to function. Because we want to make sure that it's going to function and do the job we intended it to do or need it to do, right? And this person needed their grass cut. A couple different ways we can approach that. But we need to make sure that whichever way we approach it, all of the parts are there. Conformity, right? Does it conform to standards? Clarity, do we know what that is? Do we know what that looks like? Are we clear on both sides of the discussion? And correctness, do we have the right thing, right? Because if I get the right, I can do a really, really good quality product, but if it's the wrong product or the wrong solution, right, it's not meeting your needs, right? Maybe I give you a lawnmower and what you really needed was an edge trimmer. Let's make sure that we're getting the right product out there. So putting this together, I was thinking about, how can we position this? And I thought, project success. Success is when you address the need, the problem, need, or opportunity. Success is when the end deliverable meets the acceptance criteria. Now you look at acceptance criteria, and for the most part, acceptance criteria is around quality. Okay, so we look at the lawnmower. My acceptance criteria is not that I have a 21-inch lawnmower as much as I have cut grass. And I have cut grass to, 2 inches high or, whatever the spec is. So what we want to do is within our acceptance criteria, we want to layer in very specific acceptance criteria. And as much as possible, let's try to make some of that acceptance criteria very, very numerical, very, very objective. So you're probably sitting here wondering, why the picture of the Leaning Tower of Pisa? Well, let's think about that for a moment. Now, the Campanelli, which is a bell tower in Italian, is what the Leaning Tower is. Now, I got the opportunity to visit Pisa many years ago and actually climbed the tower. And I never really thought about it. I knew about the Leaning Tower of Pisa, seen pictures of it, I could tell you about it, but I never knew what it was actually for. And this is the classic picture of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But when you zoom back, right beside the Leaning Tower is a cathedral, and beside that is a baptistry. Now, if you're familiar with the Roman Catholic faith, you don't enter the church until you're baptized. So they built a separate building to baptize people, Right? So you can go into the baptistry if you're not baptized. If you're baptized, then you can go into the church. Well, the tower, the bell tower, was there to call people. Now, this was finished in 1372. Back then, they didn't have smartphones. They didn't have email. They didn't have texting. They didn't have telephones. Heck, pretty much the only communication they had was you'd talk to each other. So what they would do is they would build a tall tower to take the bell and put it as high as possible, because the higher you put a nice loud noise, the further it reaches. So they build these towers. This is about 180 feet high. Put some bells up at the top. There's 7 of them. And they're nice big bells, so they're loud. They'd ring them, and people all miles around would hear that and know it's time to come to church. That's the purpose of the tower. Now, the fact that it's leaning, it has been a classic example of a design failure. It's been a classic example of an engineering failure. But yet, let's think about its real purpose, its need. Its need was to make sound, to call people into the church, and it did that. And in fact, it's been doing that since 1372. Now, when they first started building the tower, they only got to about the 2nd or 3rd level, and it started to subside. It started to sink. And basically what happened is they built it on some soft ground. So they paused for a bit and thought about it and dealt with some wars and things. And the tower actually took 199 years to build. So it's a little kind of side note there. Next time you think about your project going over time, here's one that went 199 years. So it took them a long time to do it. And over the years, it has actually subsided a little bit more, and they've had to stabilize it and things. But here's an object that has been in existence for thousands of years. Its purpose was designed to draw people to their church. And now it is not only drawing people to their church from the nearby countryside, but from around the world. Because Pisa is a tourist destination, and it would not be that without this leaning tower. Because you go to a lot of little towns throughout the Italian countryside, and you're going to find a cathedral and a tower and a baptistry. And they're beautiful, don't get me wrong. They're absolutely stunningly gorgeous. But there's lots of them. And you can go down the street, drive it a couple hours down the road, and you'll find another Pisa with another cathedral, with another baptistry, and another tower. But they're not leaning, so they're not exceptional, so they don't draw people in. My other favorite little piece about the whole Leaning Tower of Pisa is the very top section. They set actually on an angle to try to make it look straighter, so it's like the whole thing goes this way and then the top piece kind of does this. Yeah, kind of fun. All right, moving on. When it comes to quality, who is the most important stakeholder? So we're just going to do a poll for this one. Okay, and we're going to show the results here. So we've got one person saying senior management, a couple saying sponsor, the majority saying client/end user, and it's about a 50-50 split there. I totally see why you're saying senior management and why you're saying sponsor, because really the sponsor is the representative of senior management. And yes, quality is important to those stakeholders, totally agree. But we want to think about this for a second. Who is the one who signs off? The person who signs off, or the role who signs off, is the client. Now, oftentimes the client and the sponsor is the same person. So we have one person playing both of those roles. But the reality is the sponsor, although they approve the project, although they fund the project, although they support the project, as the sponsor, you do not sign off. The moment you are signing off, you are playing the role of customer, and that's when you're going to be looking at quality. Now, the end user, good quality, bad quality, it's the end user that's going to be impacted. So yes, there's a really good argument for that as well. And likely the client is going to be turning to their end users and saying, okay, dude, is this working? Can I sign off? What do you think? So, there's a lot of merit in that. Totally agree. At the end of the day, when we look at our project and say, did it finish? Was it successful? If success truly is acceptance by the customer, which I feel it is, then the customer is the most important. Now, had one or two people put in there around the project manager, very important stakeholder as well, but really this is more around the creation or maintenance or management of quality. So some really good answers there, folks. Great, loving it. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on. So when we talk in terms of key concepts of managing quality, there's 4 key concepts I want to explore today. The first of which is customer satisfaction, and that's really the heart behind that question that we just asked. Who's the most important stakeholder when it comes to quality? And if we're going to take it from the perspective of customer satisfaction, the customer is the most important. We saw that in your answers when we first asked the question, share with me a bad customer experience or a bad quality experience, and customer experience came in there. The next key concept we're going to take a look at is prevention versus inspection. And this is the concept of let's build quality in, not inspect it in. So we're going to build it into the process. Okay. Broad ownership, who owns quality? We saw some spread across that question. And from an ownership perspective, the ownership is quite broad. It's not with single individuals. It's across the organization. So, we're going to explore that a little bit. And then the whole concept of continuous improvement. And this really came out of the whole total quality piece from the 50s and 60s. Okay. So when we talk in terms of success, it's not about being on time. It's not about being on budget. It's not about being on scope. It's about, do you have acceptance? Now, there are times when you do have to deliver by a particular date. There's times when you have to deliver, within a particular dollar value. So yes, we do need to deliver within acceptance criteria, but we don't necessarily need to deliver on time and on budget, because if you don't get the acceptance, you've failed. Okay, to be blunt. So our key concept here that we're going to first explore is customer satisfaction, and this is conformance to requirements as well as fitness for use. So when we talk about customer satisfaction, what makes a customer satisfied? What makes them say, yes, this is good and I like this? First of all, does it conform to the requirements? Does it conform to my needs? And in simple terms, does it friggin' work? So when we have those, we get sign-off. And really that's what it's about. It's about getting sign-off. Our second main concept that we're going to explore today is that of prevention versus inspection. Now, this chart is adapted from the work of Ireland and the work of Kerzner. In the first column, we have low prevention. We have higher appraisal, which is inspection, which is let's make the thing, let's check it. Then we have higher internal failure, i.e. we've checked it, it's wrong. And then we have higher external failure compared with the scenario where we increase the prevention, reduces the need for appraisal, reduces the internal and external failures. Let's take a look at this in the modern world. We're putting together, a product that we're going to deliver. Let's use the software example. We're creating some software. If I have a relatively low prevention, I'm going to have a greater need to appraise or evaluate or test. I'm going to have greater internal failures. These would be the failures from the tests. I have greater external failures. These are the bugs that actually makes it past the test, not into production. So when I increase the prevention, I reduce the need for appraisal. I reduce the amount of internal and external failures. The net result here is that I can end up with a net savings. So we get into this whole concept of cost of quality, because like anything within projects, we need to make sure that whatever it is we're doing this with a cost benefit in mind. Because if we're not making benefit here, we're losing money, we're wasting time and energy. So by increasing that prevention, we can reduce appraisal, internal, external failures, and hence get some savings. That can be a difficult sell. Now, I have kind of a good example of this. Years ago, I used to support this app. I was working at one of the banks, and that application was first written and built with the mind of, we're going to just do this for like a kind of one-time, one-off thing. And in doing so, they didn't really kind of, think about where that's going to go. So we needed to do a bit more testing, the internal, external failures. Down the road, it actually cost us more to run it. So we didn't get that net savings. So we can, have a significant savings there. Now, that of course is hindsight 2020, because at the time it was built, it was, a one-time thing, but I ended up supporting it for a number of years, and I think it had about a 12-year lifespan in the end. And this whole concept really boils down to that old expression, and I'm pretty sure it was Edison, I think, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And really that's what this concept is about. If I can put a little bit of prevention in, it's going to help on the long run. It's quicker, easier, faster, cheaper to do the prevention than it is to do the fix after the fact. Okay, so we're going to fire up our next poll, which is who's responsible for quality in a project. And this particular poll was a multiple answer poll. So what that means is each respondent could actually check 2 or more answers. So we take a look at the results and we see it's very evenly divided. Sponsor, senior management, then we see a smaller group of around 40%, 35, 45%, customer, client, and you notice that the project manager and the team members, high percentage, 80, 90%, and then of course the regulators, because we're often being driven by regulatory projects, show up there. Now, this really dramatically shows, and very correctly, that quality in the project is distributed across the board. So when we talk in terms of who is responsible for quality, what we're really saying is it's not any one person or group, it's all of us. We each have a role to play, and we need to be thinking about that when we talk in terms of planning quality, management, and executing. Who's doing what? Do those people know what they're doing? And are they doing that? And is it having an effect? Right? So when we look at that, and in the manufacturing world especially, but in pretty much in all industries, management is about 85%, because we talked about the quote from Edward Deming at the beginning of a bad system will beat a good person every time. Well, management is the one who puts the systems in place. Management is the one who supports them, funds them, provides resources, approves them, all that kind of stuff. So really, if that's true, which I believe it is, a bad system will beat a good person every time. If I don't have the good system, I'm kind of sunk, right? I can only do so much. Now, workers, and I hate this terminology, management workers, but the frontline staff, they're about 15%. Now, management, it's about fixing the process, about supplying the required resources. Team members, it's about taking responsibility to identify and to report those problems. Because if we put our senior management hat on, if we don't know there's an issue, we can't do anything about it, right? And if we put our team member hat on, if we're not telling them, then how can they possibly fix it, right? So we need to work, in concert. And this is part of the reason why I'm not really keen on the terminology of management workers, because it really kind of implies a bit of an us-them type scenario. So we definitely want to make it much more of a synergistic, cooperative environment. So we take a look at the next key concept, and this is expanding on that around the broad ownership. As a processor, as a PM running a project, I'm going to take input from my supplier. So I'm going to go buy materials, I'm going to buy equipment, I may buy some people, right, in the form of contractors, etc. I'm going to bring those into my project. I'm going to do whatever it is we're going to do, and then we're going to spit out the deliverable at the end, or the product. If we think in those terms, well, what we deliver to our client is often then that client becomes a supplier for the next person or group in the chain. So let's take a look at a quick example here. You've just hired someone to build a deck on the back of your house. And that contractor is going to go to Home Depot or Home Hardware or Lowe's or wherever to buy lumber, right? To buy 2x4s and such. Well, let's think about where Home Depot got the 2x4s from. Right? They bought them from a mill, a sawmill. Well, the sawmill went out to a woodlot and bought raw lumber. Right? So they bought logs, they sawed them into 2x4s, dried them, treated them, sold them to Home Depot. Now, if you're the lumberjack in the woods choosing which trees to cut down and which ones to leave up, you're looking for that prime wood. Well, the decisions you make and the quality work that you do will then reflect in the ability for the sawmill to do quality work, and then will hence reflect in the ability for Home Depot or Home Hardware or Lowe's to sell the quality lumber. So if you're the project manager on that first project and you're cutting down those trees and you're picking bad trees, you're picking ones that are diseased, maybe they're too green, maybe they're too dead, whatever that looks like, then you're sending them off to the sawmill. Well, they can only do so much with that. And maybe they're not doing it correctly. Maybe they're not sawing them correctly. They're cutting against the grain. They're not drying them fully. They're sending, wet, green lumber off to Home Hardware, Home Depot, or Lowe's. And now that's ending up in someone's deck, and that's showing up on the contractor side as they attempt to, work with this inferior product as an input. So we want to be aware that our decisions around quality are going to reach beyond the boundaries of our project. In fact, they could reach beyond the boundaries of our project to another project and even beyond that. So, what we do can have a bigger lasting impact, and hence also what we bring in. So if we're the second or third on that chain, we're going to be looking to our clients, to our suppliers, to ensure that we're getting quality from them as input. Now, the fourth key concept that I wanted to explore today is the whole continuous improvement piece. And you cannot have this conversation without referencing Shewhart Deming's process improvement cycle, plan, do, check, act. And here's how this works. We start out with an idea. We have a theory about how we can improve what we're doing. So we're looking at our process and saying, okay, we've got a quality issue here. We want to do a better job. Now, if I use that lumber analogy, let's say we're the lumber yard and we're having an issue with boards warping and being returned and not being sellable and so forth. And our theory is that, they're out in the rain, they're getting wet. So as much as they're kiln dried when they came from the sawmill, they're getting wet, their moisture content's going too high, and hence they're warping. So let's enable the experiment now. So we've got a theory. Let's put them in the shed. Let's put a tarp over them. Let's keep them dry. So we enable the experiment. We follow that plan. We then check to see the results. We measure the results. So we figure out how we're going to measure this. We say, okay, well, let's take three sample boards out of 10 and measure the twist on them, or whatever that's going to look like, and we check it. And then we ask the simple question: did our change have an effect? And if it did, let's capture that knowledge. Let's revise the standard. Let's do that. Let's act on that knowledge and make that part of our new standard. Now, this is a continuous cycle. So although we start in the plan phase, having done this once and saying, hey, we got a measurable improvement, let's now look at what else we can improve. What else can we do better? And this may be in the form of the bugs that are getting in and eating the wood, or whatever that looks like, right? So each time we go through this plan, do, check, act cycle, we're going to come out the other end with either a yes, that made a difference, or no, that didn't. And if it did make a difference, we revise it into the standards and do a better job. And it's a continuous constant flow of what we're doing and trying to do it better and better each time. So want to ask the question, what barriers are you facing when you do project from a quality perspective? And classic story here: cost, time restrictions, time constraints, haste, people going too quickly, colleagues who don't understand when things are done too quickly, etc. So when you look at that, and we all struggle with this, we absolutely all do. I was last night putting the final touches on this presentation, after a full day at work. So we all do that, and there are times we have to do that. So we try to balance out the cost of the resource against the relative beneficial quality piece. Could we have made this session even better than it was? Absolutely. Right? We could have done greater research. We could come up with better graphics, all that kind of stuff. But are we getting a payback? Are we getting a benefit for that? Right? And the answer is probably not. Right? So we find that balance, because we do need to consider the cost of quality and make sure that whatever we're putting together is going to do the job, meet the needs, but yet still be cost effective, right? So quality management must address both. It must address the management of the project, the process. It must address the product itself, right? And failure to meet these results reduce customer satisfaction, increase costs or delays or rework, increase risk, right? In short, it's kind of poor business practice. So we think about that project where we're rolling out that new deliverable, whether that's in the form of some new software, whether that's in the form of a new training that you're going to offer to a client, whether that's in the form of a new product that you're going to end up selling to the client, such as a deck on the back of someone's house. If I'm not meeting the quality requirements on the project side, things are late and they're overrun on cost, etc. And if I'm not meeting on the product side, then we're ending up with a low quality product that needs repairs, that needs updates, that needs fixes, right? So if we look at it as the deck, the deck was late in being done, so low customer satisfaction. The deck went over budget, and at the same time, the nails are coming up and the boards are twisting and there's slivers and the paint's peeling. I'm just not going to be a happy camper on all fronts, right? Now, well, if I meet the quality on one front and not the other, if I meet the quality on the project management front, I'm on time, I'm on scope, I'm on, I got the job done, but the product itself wasn't that good quality, so the boards are warping and the paint's peeling, etc. I'm going to have a short-term satisfaction. But when I meet the quality on the product side, then I get that more long-term satisfaction. But if I can meet it on both, well, hey, there we've got our dynamic duo, yeah? And you're going to have a much better day. So, if we want to do better business, and we really need to think of it in those terms, because as project managers, we have customers, we have clients, we have budgets, we have staff. We're effectively running a business. So we need to make sure that we're taking good care of our customers and producing a quality product. Okay, here's a poll. Do features equate to quality? Oh, sorry, I need to hit number 3. There we go. So do features equate to quality? And this was a simple yes-no quiz, okay? And the overwhelming answer that came back was no, they do not, right? Features do not equate to quality. Features are things. So we think about that scenario with the deck. If I add a gazebo, it doesn't make it higher quality. It makes it a deck with a gazebo, right? The paint's still peeling, the boards are still warping, right? So adding features does not equal quality. Now, from a project perspective, the basis of PMI's perspective is that quality equals conformance to requirements, which we've already identified. Requirements is the need. It's conformance to the specifications. The specifications come out of the needs. So when you specify the product, that's driven by the requirement. So I figure out what my requirement is, I figure out the specification that's going to meet that requirement. And when those two are both there, you know what, we've got something that's going to be higher quality. And it's conformance to fitness for use, aka does it work, aka don't use the sheet as a parachute, it doesn't work. I tried that as a kid. Yeah, so you want to make sure that what you're doing is going to meet the needs, right? And it is not a subjective variable, it's specific. It's you want to figure out what those quality objectives are. They should be in the product specifications. They often are, because you look at a product specification, you say, I'm going to roll out this new software. I need to have X number of users having sub 3 second response when there's a million records, whatever that looks like. So look for opportunities to say, I want to figure out the quality of this, right? Does it work? And extras don't improve the quality. What makes this thing quality is that it works, it's fit for use, and it lasts. I'm sure many of you have been to IKEA. And if you go to IKEA, go to the chair section, right, where all the chairs are, and you'll find a big glass case with a chair inside of it, and there's this like pneumatic press that's pushing on the chair and then lifting up and pushing on the chair and lifting up. And what it's doing is it's simulating sitting down. It's simulating a person sitting down on the chair and getting up and sitting down on the chair and getting up. And the whole point of this is that IKEA had a perception of being low quality. So what they did is they said, well, we're going to prove that we're good quality by making this display that someone is sitting on our chair thousands and thousands and thousands of times over again. So sitting down, getting up, sitting down, getting up. Now you look at that chair, it has the exact same features as every other chair in the world. It has legs, it has a seat for you to sit on, it has a back for you to rest, it has armrests. It's a chair, right? They've all got the same features. But what makes this one a quality chair is someone has sat on it, 150,000 times, right? So, and it hasn't broken, right? So this is what we look at when we say, okay, let's try to make this an objective variable. Now, this costs money to do, right? So we now need to ask ourselves the simple question, are we getting the return on our investment here by doing this extra work on quality? One of the challenges with this, because it is around customer expectations, it is around acceptance, is that expectations over time change. Now, if I take a look at this chart, and this is called the Canu model, if I take a look at this chart, all the stuff that we identified, or sorry, that we didn't identify, excuse me, all the implicit things, this kind of brings us up from dissatisfaction to kind of mid-satisfied, but not really high satisfied, not delight. And this is the items that you expect to be there, right? So if I think about a car, for example, when you go buy a car, especially a brand new one, there are certain things you just plain old expect to be there, and if they're not there, I'm really kind of unhappy about this. Now, if the items that I asked for are there, this is the explicit. This is the more the items that I asked for are there, the more my satisfaction grows, right? So if I deliver everything that has been asked for, if I've delivered everything as explicitly stated, I'm actually going to get to a relatively high level of satisfaction. Now, to get to delight, we need to hit some unspoken things. This is the mint on your pillow in the hotel. This is that little extra thing that says, ooh, oh, that's lovely, right? Now, be cautious with this in the world of projects, because we are closely getting into the world of gold plating. That's the word I was looking for, of gold plating. Now, gold plating is when we put extra features in that don't really add any value, right? So we're wasting money. We're putting, gold plate on it, then it looks pretty, but it's not really any value here. So to do the delight, to do the excitement, the unspoken stuff, it still has to have some value. Now, the big challenge here is that over time, expectations change. So I remember when I was younger, when I first got my license, and airbags weren't a thing yet. Right? I don't even know if they're invented. And it wasn't until some years after I'd been driving that airbags first started to come onto the market. And I remember a buddy of mine who had a car with airbags, and I remember specifically, Don, when he got a car and it had airbags, like, oh my god, it's the first guy I knew who had airbags. It was a big deal back then. So this was into the delight, this was into the explicit high performance, this is the top end of the scale. Today, however, you buy a car, a brand new car, and it doesn't have airbags, it's like, oh my god, I'm very dissatisfied. No, this isn't good at all, right? If we look at computers, color screens, right? When I first started in computers, it was DOS, like not even Windows, just DOS. Black and white screens, that was it, right? Then we got into the graphical user interface, we got into color screens, and I remember, going into the mall one day and seeing a monitor there with a color screen, a 16 color picture of a, flower or a butterfly or something, and it's like, wow, look at that, that's amazing, right? So we're into the delight, we're into the high. Now you get a computer, if it doesn't have a color screen, you're like, what? Yeah, and we're seeing this constant flow, right? I mean, the big deal right now is touchscreen, right? Computers more and more and laptops more and more are coming with touchscreens. Let's fast forward 5-10 years from now, everything's going to be touchscreen. Right? You won't be able to find one without touchscreen. And so hence over time, those features that were the excitement, delight, they become implicit, they become expected, and if they're not there, it's going to drive dissatisfaction. So you got to kind of be aware of that. So we've been talking about quality within a project. We've been talking about the product side. We've been talking about the process side. If we take a look a little more in depth in the process, we've got things like our work breakdown structure, what's in and out, scoping statements, our network diagram, our Gantt charts, our schedule, the S-curve of the costing, the team, the risk analysis, the process itself, the meetings, etc. And the reality is we need quality on every one of these. We need quality everywhere. So if we can do a better job of, and even if we end up upping our game on any one of these, I know meetings are a huge pain point for a lot of people. If we can up our game on meetings and just simply do meetings better, right? that's gonna translate. That's gonna expand and influence other areas that they're going to be better as well. So it is very much an interrelated topic. I pulled this graphic from the integration session that we did a few months back, and I looked at that and I thought, yeah, this really holds true. So, all right, let's get into the technical details of this. There's 3 processes here: plan, quality management, perform quality assurance, and control quality. And I thought the best bang for our buck today, because we do have a limited amount of time here together, is to talk about plan, quality management, and quality control. Now, the purpose of plan is to ensure that the relevant project quality standards are defined. And what we're really saying here is that quality is planned in, not inspected in, but more so, this is about assuming that responsibility is, everyone is responsible for quality. Do they know that? Do they know what is expected of them? Do they know what the roles are? Do they know what to do? Are they aware even that they should be looking at it with a quality lens? And what does that lens look like? And what should they be looking for? And what should they be inspecting? So, we want to, within plan quality management, ask those simple questions and basically look at this and say, are we doing it? What should we be doing? Are we doing it? It comes under control. What should we be doing? Who should be doing what? Let's figure out what tasks we need to do. Let's figure out the thresholds. Let's resource it. Let's make sure that it's going to get done. Okay. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce you to the PACE model. It's get to the real problem, generate alternatives, make a choice, perform a reality evaluation. So let's dig into this in a little bit of details. So get to the real problem. If you don't understand the root cause, you can't solve the problem. So first step is, let's do some interviewing. Let's look what it is not. Maybe use a 5 whys exercise. But let's get to the real problem. What's the real issue here? And this is the beginning of that plan, do, check, act cycle, right? What's the real issue? What are we going to do about it? Now, in the second piece, we're going to basically generate alternatives. So how can we solve this issue, right? So we've identified the symptoms. We looked at the causes. We're going to maybe do some suggestion circles, maybe some brainstorming, keeping in mind, of course, always doing nothing is always an option. So when you generate those alternatives, one of the alternatives could be, we're just going to live with it because the cost of the solution outweighs the benefit received. Let's make sure that we're not missing some, perceived benefits that perhaps, that are not obvious. But we want to generate some of those alternatives. We're then going to make a choice. None of these models work unless you actually act, right? So hence the plan, do, check, act piece, right? We're going to make a choice. You could do negative voting, you could rank order, or maybe modify Delphi, cost-benefit analysis, etc. But what you need to do is you need to make a choice. Here's what we think is the issue. Here's some alternatives. Let's pick one. Great. Now let's do it. Okay. So what we need to do now is execute. And after we execute, once we execute, during execution, we want to perform a reality evaluation. And what we're really saying here is we want to make sure that whatever it is we're doing is working. Are we seeing that benefit? So things like sounding boards, force field analysis, all of these kinds of things. And we may be doing a little bit of the first step again, which is, determine the real problem. Have we solved it? Has the problem gone away? Has the symptoms that we've seen disappear? Or have they just shifted and, that one's gone away, but we're showing up over here? What does that look like? Okay. So when we talk in terms of quality control, it's about variation. It's about, things aren't going how we'd hoped they were going. So the question is, which is easier to fix, the one on the left or the one on the right? Now, on the left, we're all over the place. We've got data points that are close to the center. They're way out on the edge. They're up, they're down, they're left, they're right. On the right, all of our data points are in a pretty close circle or in a pretty close grouping, just kind of in the center but a little bit high. So on the left, we need to fix the machine. There's something seriously broken here, and there's potentially multiple things broken. There might be multiple causes. So I may fix one cause and only one or two of those dots sort of move towards the center. However, on the one on the right, if I adjust my aim, if I adjust that one thing, I can kind of bring the whole grouping down. So the one on the right is actually a lot easier to deal with than the one on the left. And you need to really kind of take a look at your scenario, your situation, and say, do I have a nice tight grouping, or am I all over the place? And we want to think about the mechanisms for managing and monitoring that. It can be in the form of on time, on scope, on budget, but keeping in mind, of course, when you measure those aspects, you're not measuring the quality of the product, but you're measuring the quality of the process. And the process is nothing without the resulting product. So yes, we want to make sure that we're doing a good job of running our projects, but we also want to make sure we're doing a good job of delivering deliverables that are actually needed. And the two do go hand in hand, because when I have a good process, I often get to a better product. Now, one of the other challenges is how much do we see? And in this example here, we've got the project, which is represented by a ship steaming towards an iceberg. Well, if you're out in the open seas steaming along and you look ahead, you'll see the iceberg, but you only see 1/7 of the iceberg. So we only see a little piece of it. And the point of this is that you will see a portion of what is there, a relatively small portion. So you see it in the form of scrap, warranty work, documented work, etc. But there's an underlying customer dissatisfaction here. And I always say that what dissatisfied customers do is they leave. And when a dissatisfied customer leaves, they usually tell another customer or a potential customer, right? The old they told two friends, they told two friends. But when a customer leaves, you don't often see that, right? It may be in the form of they just go quiet. Maybe you've got hundreds of customers in your business. So a few leave, and you kind of say, well, that's natural and that's normal. But you want to take a look at what are those missed opportunities? What's that corporate image look like? What's the hidden rework? What's the product image look like, and so forth? And when we look at this customer dissatisfaction piece, it really does boil down to a dissatisfied customer leaves. Now, satisfied customers tend to stay and even come back. And I want to just share with you a real quick customer satisfaction story. Used to work for one of the banks, and I went to MEC one day, Mountain Equipment Co-op, and as a customer service organization, they are really good. Their customer service is some of the top. So I went and ordered a paddle from them. They didn't have it in stock, so they ordered it for me, and the wrong one came in, and then they're going to ship me a replacement. But when the wrong one came in, they were, they were willing to lend me one for the weekend because they didn't want to inconvenience me and all this kind of stuff. So great customer service. But the real point of this story is when I was walking up to the counter, during this very excellent customer service experience, the guy behind the counter looks up at me, and I'm wearing my badge, my lapel pin, and he looks at me and says, "Hey, you work for that bank? You guys are awesome!" Right? And he went to tell me his story of how he went into the branch one day to close all of his accounts and leave. Now, in a lot of ways, when you have a customer who openly comes in and says, "I'm dissatisfied, I'm leaving," they're actually a good customer because they're telling you. And fortunately, the customer service rep on the other side of the counter was savvy enough to deal with this well, turn this guy into a huge convert, and he is now one of their biggest advocates. And anyone who he'll talk to, he tells them about what a great experience he has, right? So he's now like won over as a customer, right? And of course, much like the customer who goes away, he's telling two friends. So we want to look for those small, subtle indicators around customer dissatisfaction. And those are good indicators that we're not doing quality work. And when we see customer satisfaction, hear stories like that, there's an indicator where, we're actually doing some quality work. When we look at any population, you're going to get a distribution, and especially in a larger population, based on how you measure it, you can apply a little bit of math and you create this normal distribution, or sigma. Now, the whole point of sigma is that one sigma, or one standard deviation away from the norm, you're going to end up with 68.26 of the population. So you're going to end up with the majority of the population in that kind of narrow band in the center. The further out you go, so we go from 68 to 95, and then from 95 to 99, so we're only gaining, less than 4% of additional population the further out we go. And then when we go from 3 sigma all the way out to 6 sigma, so we're going 3 more sigma out, we go from 99.7 to 99.9, right? And it's actually like 99.73 to 99.9996, I think it is. So we go from a chunk of the population. The further out we go, the more it's going to cost us to get that additional smaller percentage. And this is why a lot of organizations, although a lot of people talk about 6 sigma, most organizations are running somewhere around 4 sigma, which is 99.9 99 something of the population, and hence our thing at the beginning of 99.9%. To go beyond that, it gets very expensive for very little gain. Now, there are some industries that totally make sense to do that. Healthcare, nuclear energy, aviation, totally makes sense to go there, right? But there's a lot of industries where it doesn't. So we do definitely want to balance that off. So the further out we go, the better we get, the harder it is to take that next step and to make that improvement. Hence the term the low-hanging fruit. So we think about, what's the low-hanging fruit? Where can we make our biggest gains? The better we do, the harder it is to do better. So in project success, it's more than just being on time and on budget. It's about, doing that quality, that customer satisfaction. So I'm going to pose this question for reflection. How can we do better? One of the biggest things we can do to do better on quality is start by just having the conversation. So sit around in the team, have that conversation, raise that awareness. Be aware that quality is everyone's job. It's senior management, it's sponsor, it's the client, it's the project manager, it's the team, right? It's the end users. Without all of those factors, we're not going to be doing good quality. We also want to think in terms of, what am I doing that's going to feed the next line in that? And am I dealing with a quality supplier? We often do RFPs, we vet our suppliers, we make sure they're quality, right? So what we're doing here is we're actually doing some quality assurance work. Next question is it working, right? So, we want to think about those things. And it is going to take some time and effort and some energy and some cost. But, if we don't put in, we don't get out. So what you put into the system, you're going to get out. We need to put some resources to that. If, however, we're pretty happy with how we're doing, okay, let's keep rolling and not worry about it too much. But if we want to improve our performance, well, I think we've got some ideas what we can do. Think about those root causes. Think about what we could do to potentially address those. Run the experiment, right? Plan, do, check, act. If it's working, let's make it part of our norm. Let's move forward. Okay, some key points here. Quality is not subjective. We often think of it as that way, but we can turn it into objective measures. It really is about qualities in the eye of the acceptor. So, is this something we can accept? Is it something I like? Is it something that I'm going to, judge as being quality? But we need to find out, as project managers, we need to find out what that lens looks like. How are people going to be looking and judging at our product and our result? There is a cost benefit here. There's a perceived cost to quality. Now, the cost of quality is free. When you find the right balance, what you save will pay for it. And I use the example of that piece of software that I was supporting for a few years. We spent a lot of extra money in subsequent years rewriting that code, working with it, because it was never designed to be used more than once. Now, I don't blame the person who originally did it, because they were following their mandate, they were told make this as a one-time use Band-Aid. And of course, we all know how one-time use Band-Aids go. But if we had a little bit of looking beyond the borders of our project and said, what, it's probably going to be a one-time use thing, but likely it's gonna happen. We're going to be using this multiple years. I mean, it ended up having about a 12-year life to it, and it was a yearly cycle. So each year when I managed it, I would always sneak in a little bit of an upgrade. And I say sneak, but I mean, I did get permission from my sponsor, and I did talk to her about it. And each time it was, can't justify the extra spend, but, so I would justify it by, what, if I do this little upgrade, we're going to reap the benefit here. It'll kind of be about a net wash, but it'll set us up better for next year. And we both agreed that it's likely we're going to be using it against next year, even though we've been told that we're not. So, after a couple years, I managed to do a couple upgrades, and we got the process running much smoother and easier, and we ended up saving some money in the end. The customer definitely reaps the benefit, especially downstream. And, going back to that example we just looked at, if I could go back in time and do that very first coding differently, we would have reaped some much bigger benefits down the road. So, we want to consider that, and at times it's justifiable to increase our project spend, and increase the budgets and kind of, build something that's got a little bit of a lot better quality. And quality has a lasting impact, so both good and bad, right? So, we buy that low quality product, we're saddled with the maintenance and the issues and it's not doing what I need it to do, versus we spent extra up front and and hence you get the better quality. So out of all that, I'm happy to say that we buy better quality cars nowadays, and hence we don't have the issues that we did with that first SUV, that Grand Wagoneer. But it was still a nice car and I enjoyed it. But the quality just wasn't there, so unfortunately we had to move on. If I do win the lottery, however, I'm probably going to get one just because for nostalgia, because they are kind of cool. All right, I'm going to finish up today. Quality is not an act; it is a habit, from Aristotle. And I can't talk quality without sharing this great picture. A little shout out to my friend Jackie. She was a student in my 5-day PMP exam prep, and we had just finished Wednesday, finished talking about quality. She's driving home, and this van pulls in front of her. It's kind of hard to read, but it says, "Quality makes friends." So, of course, she did what any reasonable person would do. She pulled out her camera and took a picture. You can see the snow and ice on the windshield. This was a week after Hurricane Sandy down in the New Jersey shore. And yeah, I just love that picture. So yeah, quality makes friends. All right, folks. Thanks so much for your time today. Hope you've enjoyed this session. Hope you found it meaningful and useful. Our next session is HR. It's coming up on Friday, November the 8th. It will be recorded as always, and we'll see you next time.